I never thought I'd find myself in this situation. We'd been married for 7 years, and I believed we had a solid relationship built on mutual respect. That was until last Tuesday when I discovered something that made me question everything. It started innocently enough. I was working from home that day and needed to find some tax documents saved on our shared laptop. My wife had left for her weekly meetup with her friends, something that had become a regular fixture in our lives. Over the past few months, as I navigated through our files, a folder caught my attention. Girls' Night Presentations. Curiosity got the better of me. Expecting to find vacation photos or recipes, I clicked on it. Instead, I found a PowerPoint file titled The Failures of My Husband, Volume 3. Volume 3. There were others before this. My heart sank as I opened the file. The presentation was meticulously crafted with professional transitions, color-coded sections, and even a table of contents. 37. Slides dedicated to documenting my shortcomings, embarrassing moments, and what she considered failures in our marriage. There were photos of home repair projects I'd botched, screenshots of awkward text messages I'd sent, and an entire section called Things He Says He'll Do But Never Does. One slide featured a picture of me sleeping on the couch with the caption, His favorite hobby, avoiding responsibility. Another showed our overflowing garbage can titled, Invisible to His Eyes. I stared at the screen, a knot forming in my stomach. This wasn't just venting to friends. This was a carefully curated presentation she had obviously spent hours creating. And based on the file name, she'd done this at least twice before. I scrolled through the entire thing, each slide feeling like a punch to the gut. There was even a section titled Predictions, where she listed things she believed I would fail at in the coming months. Some were played for laughs, but others revealed genuine disappointment and resentment. The final slide read, To be continued, with a date for the next update, her gathering scheduled for this coming Friday. I closed the laptop and walked around the house trying to process what I'd seen. Was this how she really saw me? As a collection of failures and disappointments? Was our entire marriage just material for her to entertain her friends? The front door opened. I heard her cheerful voice announcing she was home. I quickly composed myself, not ready for a confrontation yet. We went through our evening routine as if nothing had happened, but inside, my mind was racing. That night, lying awake while she slept peacefully beside me, I made a decision. I wouldn't confront her directly, not yet. I wouldn't yell or make accusations. Instead, I would add a slide of my own to her presentation, the final slide she never expected. I didn't know exactly what it would be yet, but I knew it needed to make an impact. It needed to be something that would make her see me, really see me perhaps for the first time in years. And it needed to happen during her next presentation to her friends. As I drifted off to sleep, a plan began forming in my mind. This wouldn't be about revenge. It would be about truth. And sometimes the truth hurts more than any insult ever could. The next morning, I waited until my wife left for her yoga class before returning to the laptop. I needed to understand the full extent of what I was dealing with. The Girls' Night Presentations folder contained more than I initially discovered. There were indeed volumes 1 and 2 of The Failures of My Husband, along with other presentations with titles like Marriage, Expectations versus Reality, and Things I Wish I Knew Before Saying, I Do. I opened Volume 1, dated nearly a year ago. It was shorter, more lighthearted, focusing mainly on harmless quirks. My inability to fold laundry correctly, my terrible singing in the shower, my obsession with collecting old vinyl records that I rarely played. Still hurtful to see displayed for others' entertainment, but nothing like the latest version. Volume 2, created 6 months ago, showed a shift in tone. It included more pointed criticisms, forgotten anniversaries, interrupted conversations, dismissed concerns. There was a slide titled Communication Breakdown that featured a chart tracking how often I apparently changed the subject when she brought up serious topics. By Volume 3, the content had evolved into something much more cutting and personal. My career setbacks, financial decisions she disagreed with, intimate details about our relationship that should never have been shared with others. One slide included a recording of me snoring with the caption, "Why sleep divorce might be necessary." As I explored these files, I discovered something else. Embedded notes in the presentations with remarks she planned to make during her delivery. Comments like, "This always gets a good laugh," and "Wait for reactions before continuing." It was a performance, a comedy routine, with me as the unwitting punchline. I scrolled through photos on our shared cloud account from the past year. There she was, standing in our living room, pointing at the TV where a slide was displayed. Her friends clutching wine glasses and laughing. In one photo, I could make out my face on the screen behind her, caught in an unflattering moment of confusion. A candid shot I never knew she'd taken. My phone pinged with a text message from her. "Working late tonight, don't wait up for dinner." We had planned to try that new restaurant around the corner. Another broken promise to add to her collection, I suppose. That evening, alone in our home, I began crafting my response. The slide that would end her presentation in a way she never anticipated. I wasn't interested in public humiliation or revenge. What I wanted was for her to feel what I felt, to be seen through a harsh, unforgiving lens, reduced to nothing but flaws and mistakes. But I didn't want it to be petty. I didn't want to create my own version of her list. Instead, I wanted truth. And as I contemplated my options, I found myself opening our wedding album. Looking at those photos, the hope and love that radiated from both our faces, I felt a profound sadness wash over me. When had we become strangers who collected evidence against each other instead of partners who faced life together? That's when it hit me. I knew exactly what my slide needed to be, something honest, powerful, impossible to laugh away with her friends. I worked late into the night, perfecting my addition to her presentation. When I was satisfied, I embedded it carefully at the end of Volume 3, setting it to appear after her to-be-continued slide. Then, I covered my tracks, making sure she wouldn't notice the modification until it was too late. 2 more days. 2 more days of pretending I didn't. No, 2 more days until the truth would slide into view for everyone to see. She had applied for a job in another state without even discussing it with me. But the final bullet point, the one I had deliberated over the most, was the one that cut the deepest. I knew she didn't love me anymore. She loved the audience she had created by mocking me. The camera captured the exact moment her face transformed from shock to horrified recognition. She lunged for the remote, frantically pressing buttons to end the presentation, but I had locked it with a password. The slide remained displayed, the words burning into the suddenly silent room. "What is this?" one of her friends finally asked, breaking the unbearable tension. My wife struggled to find words, her composure completely shattered. This isn't... Someone must have..." She trailed off, knowing there was no plausible explanation other than the truth. Another friend stood up, gathering her purse. "I think I should go," she said quietly. Others murmured in agreement, the festive atmosphere of the evening thoroughly destroyed. "No, wait!" my wife pleaded. "It's not what it looks like." "Then what is it?" asked the friend who had been so enthusiastic earlier. "Because from where I'm sitting, it looks pretty bad." As her friends awkwardly collected their things, making excuses to leave, I watched my wife's carefully constructed image crumble. The long-suffering, good-humored wife, enduring a disappointing husband, an image she had presented to these women, was now tainted by the revelation of her own betrayals. Within 15 minutes, the house was empty. She stood alone in our living room, staring at the slide still displayed on our TV. I disconnected from the camera feed and started my car. It was time to go home and face whatever came next. The drive back felt surreal, as if I were moving through a dream. Had I gone too far? Was this the end of our marriage, or could this painful exposure somehow lead to something more honest between us? I pulled into our driveway, noting that all the other cars were gone. For a moment, I sat in silence, gathering my courage. Then I took a deep breath and walked to the front door. Inside, the remnants of the gathering were everywhere. Half empty, wine glasses, plates of barely touched food, an atmosphere of abrupt departure. My wife sat on the couch, her makeup smeared with tears, the remote control still in her hand. The TV screen had finally gone dark. She looked up as I entered, her eyes red and swollen. "How could you?" she whispered. "How could I?" I replied, keeping my voice level. "How could you spend the last year documenting my failures for your friend's entertainment?" She flinched, as if I had slapped her. "You went through my computer. You went through my journal." I countered. "We've both violated each other's privacy. The difference is, I didn't share what I found with an audience." We stared at each other across the ruins of her social evening. Two people who had once promised to love and protect each other, now strangers wielding painful truths like weapons. "I want to know why," I said finally. "I need to understand how we got here." She looked down at her hands, twisting her wedding ring. When she spoke, her voice was barely audible. "You stopped seeing me a long time ago?" It wasn't the answer I expected, and it left me momentarily speechless. As the clock ticked loudly in our silent house, I realized we were standing at a crossroads, with no idea which direction would lead us forward, or if we would choose the same path at all. We moved to the kitchen, away from the abandoned party scene. Neither of us wanted to have this conversation surrounded by the evidence of her humiliation. I filled a glass with water and slid it across the counter to her. She accepted, it without meeting my eyes. "What did you mean when you said I stopped seeing you?" I finally asked, breaking the heavy silence. She took a small sip of water, collecting her thoughts. "Do you remember the promotion I got last year? The one I worked 60-hour weeks for 3 months to earn?" I nodded, unsure where this was going. "When I told you about it, you said, 'That's great,' and immediately started talking about your fantasy football team." Her voice was flat, emotionless. No celebration dinner, no questions about what it meant for my career. Nothing. I started to defend myself, but she continued. "2 months ago, I dyed my hair 3 shades darker. You didn't notice. For 5 days, and only then because your mother mentioned it on a video call." She looked up at me now, her eyes challenging. "I redecorated our bedroom in January. New curtains, new bedspread, new artwork. You walked past it all for weeks without a single comment." Each example landed like a small blow. Had I really been so oblivious? "The presentation started as a joke," she admitted quietly. "A way to laugh about the little things that bothered me instead of letting them fester. But then it became something else. When I was sharing these stories, I felt seen. I had an audience that listened, that validated my feelings. It was addictive." "So you kept adding to it? Making it more personal, more hurtful?" I said. She winced. "I didn't see it that way at the time. It just felt good to be heard." "At my expense." "Yes," she admitted, surprising me with her candor. "At your expense. I was wrong." We fell silent again, the tick of the kitchen clock marking the seconds. Outside, a car drove past, its headlights briefly illuminating our faces. "What happens now?" she asked finally. "After tonight, I can never face those women again." "Maybe that's not a bad thing," I suggested carefully. "Some of them seem to enjoy your unhappiness a little too much." A flicker of recognition crossed her face. "They did, didn't they? Every time I shared something negative, they encouraged me to tell more. When I mentioned something positive about you, they changed the subject." This realization hung between us. the knowledge that her so-called friends had been feeding on our marital discord, perhaps even fueling it. "I think we both need to decide what we want," I said finally. "If this marriage is worth saving, we have a lot of work to do. Real communication, no more performances, no more pretending." She nodded slowly. "And if it's not worth saving? Then we need to be honest about that too." She reached across the counter and, after a moment's hesitation, placed her hand over mine. It was the first genuine contact we'd had in weeks. "I need to show you something," she said suddenly, standing up. "It's important." Confused, I followed her to the living room where she picked up her tablet. Her fingers trembled as she navigated through her files. Finally, she opened a presentation titled simply Us. The first slide appeared, a photo from our wedding day. No captions, no snark, just us, beaming with happiness and hope. "I made this 3 weeks ago," she whispered. "I never showed it to anyone." As she advanced through the slides, my heart clenched. Perhaps, despite everything, we still had a chance to remember why we chose each other, and maybe, just maybe, a chance to find our way back.